Good morning. I'm Kathy Young. I'm the president and CEO of the Tri-Valley Nonprofit Alliance, and I am glad you are all here. I want to send a special thank you to Viridiana Romero from Northern California Grantmakers for her partnership in shaping today's program. We're fortunate to have a fantastic group of panelists with us, and they will be introduced shortly. I want to take a second for a special thank you to our sponsor, Sandia National Labs, who sponsors our community programs so that these can be free and open to anyone who is interested in attending. And thank you again for being here today. Vidi has a slate of questions that our panel will address. Once she has made it through her questions, we'll have about 30 minutes to open it up to yours. We are using a new program. It's right up there, the QR code, and you can use that to send us questions, which I will then try to moderate. Because this is the first time we're trying this process, so I hope you will be patient if there are glitches. We'll definitely be doing our best. You should try it without the Wi-Fi password, if you can just use your cell service, but if you need to use the Wi-Fi, there's the password there as well. And so now it's time for us to move towards our illustrious panel. Viridiana Romero is the manager of strategic initiatives at Northern California Grantmakers, where she leads funder collaboratives, pooled funds, and regional programming that strengthens the nonprofit sector. With a background spanning the nonprofit, private, and philanthropic worlds, her journey as an immigrant woman strongly impacts her passion for social justice and fuels her commitment to community-based organizations. She has held leadership roles at Amazon Collective, Blue Heart, and Sobrado Philanthropies, and has worked extensively in youth development, education, and grassroots grant making. She holds a master's in social work from the University of Michigan and dual BAs in community studies and sociology from Santa Cruz. And so I'm going to turn this over to Vidi so that she can introduce our panel and get this going. So thank you. Clap, 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 clap.
Thanks, Kathy. I didn't know you were reading my bio. Wow. So good morning, everybody. Excited to see all of you. We have a really fabulous panel with us today, and everybody's gonna get a chance to introduce themselves, their name, the organization they work at, their title, and we have 4 questions that they're gonna review. So we'll get started with that, but just wanted to do a little bit of framing. This is a great panel. This conversation happens, I believe, every year, so we're excited to have a full range of funders, both local, regional, and statewide, to join us and really talk about the nonprofit sector, talk about our grant making and our relationship with foundations and nonprofit capacity building, so all of the things that are relevant to the nonprofit sector from the viewpoint and perspective of the folks that have joined us today. So with that, we'll get started. These are the questions that they'll cover, just so you know, they're just gonna zoom on through. So they're gonna tell you a little bit about their foundation, their mission, their goals. They'll share a little bit of background about their organization. They'll talk a little bit about their grant making scope and what that looks like, and how nonprofits can engage with them. So we will kick off, and we'll just go down the table. So I'm gonna hand it over to Adriana Sanchez from the Latino Community Foundation.
Thank you, Vicky. Good morning, everybody. Buenos dias. How's everybody doing? Good morning. Well, my name is Adriana Sanchez. I am the Director of Community Organizing at the Latino Community Foundation. We exist to unleash the civic and economic power of Latinos in the state of California and beyond. And I'll share more about that. For us, we believe that Latinos, as we know, are 40% of our population here in California, and they are the backbone of a lot of our industries and communities, and therefore we should invest in them. There's huge inequities when it comes to funding groups that are underrepresented in some spaces, and our mission is to close that gap of funding. We were started in 1989 as a project of United Way, but have since been incubated by San Francisco Foundation and spun off into our own foundation just a little over 10 years ago. That means that we did not have a funder behind us to, give us an endowment. That means we fundraise all of our money every single year to be able to invest in organizations like you. Our grants average $30K because of our very small startup, but I think we've definitely scaled up in the last couple of years with grants going all the way up to $200K. And our general grant making budget the last couple of years has ranged between 5 and 7 million. It really varies. This year we were intended to do slightly under 5 million, but because of the wildfires, we had to push out 2 million unexpectedly. So we're gonna be way over budget. And then, I think I'll leave it there. How to engage?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, how do we engage? We don't have generally an open request for proposals or a grant cycle. We are very much driven by relationship building. And so oftentimes what we do is we want to have coffee with you, we want to meet you, we want to hear about your work, and then have you top of mind for when an opportunity comes up. We have done RFPs in the past, and they are incredibly heavy on you as an applicant to put together an application, and unfortunately they result in over 75% declination rates. So that's not worth your time or our time. We want to be very strategic and only invite folks that have a very, very high likelihood of getting that grant when you get invited. Our applications don't require budgets. We just want to know what's going on in your organization and fund that work. And with that, I'll hand it over to Jessica.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'll pull this up a little bit closer. My name is Jessica Avendaño. I am a program officer with Sunlight Giving. I've been with Sunlight Giving going on 4 years this summer, and our mission is focused on connecting families with young children 0 to 5 with basic needs and services. And while our office is based in Palo Alto, we work across 10 counties in the Bay Area. So let's see if I can name them all. Monterey, Santa Cruz, San Benito, Stanislaus, Merced, San Joaquin, San Mateo, Santa Clara County. Is that 10? Forgive me if I forgot one. But pretty much 10 with the exception of San Francisco and the Central Valley. So Monterey may be the one I forgot. And our core giving, we're about 10 years old, and our core strategies have been our strategy since the inception of the foundation 10 years ago. Then our family support, which focuses on partnerships with multi-service agencies that offer access to basic needs and services and the safety net. We also partner with legal aid organizations. We have our safe spaces strategy, which has a focus on early care and education. Not so much as an early literacy or kindergarten readiness funder, recognize that's really important, but more so focused on like childcare as a basic need. So that's sort of like the viewpoint we take there. We also partner with libraries because we see them as community hubs, so provide capital support to libraries and parks, park organizations, capital improvement projects for parks. Let's see, safe spaces, housing stability. We partner with emergency shelters, healthcare access with small clinics, and food security, all of the food banks in those 10 counties I mentioned. And our newest core giving area is family opportunity, which has a focus on immigration. And again, across all of those giving areas, our focus is on direct service organizations. A very small percentage of our budget is dedicated to advocacy and systems change. We are much more focused on direct service organizations. Our budget is about 32 million, and our average grant amount is about 69,000 a year. And we do have a link on our website. If you go to sunlightgiving.org, there's an inquiry form that anyone can complete and let us know where you believe your mission is aligned with the core strategies I mentioned, and someone from our team will respond. That's about it. I'll hand it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Hui-Ling Tam. I'm a relationship manager at the Walter and Elise Haas Fund, based in San Francisco. And we believe that our purpose is to support and enable community well-being of people in Oakland and San Francisco specifically, so that folks can reach their fullest potential with dignity and joy. And we aim towards community well-being by focusing on economic well-being and social well-being. In other words, we support nonprofits and organizations who are doing work to close the racial and gender wealth gap and/or activate and sustain belonging. The Walter and Elise Haas Fund is about 73 years old. We're a family foundation. There are a lot of other Haas's. We're one of them. And I only learned the difference when I joined the Haas Fund 5 years ago. We are also we've just completed a strategic refresh that we've been working on for the last 3-ish years, but also that was precipitated during the pandemic. So there are new pieces to our work. And so our operational pillars at this point are to say that we have moved from silos to integration, and that means both that former program areas, we've integrated them, but that also our team of 9 staff, we work as cross-collaborative folks. We have moved to say we want to address systems change above symptoms work only, and that instead of making contributions, we're looking to make commitments. Always centering community, with youth using trust-based practices, and with right relationship in mind, so that we can be an equitable learning organization. So our grants, our grant making budget is about $11 million annually. Our typical grant size into like 2022, 2024 was about $37,000 for a 1-year project support grant. That is changing, and our grant sizes now, one is $3.5 million over 7 years, one is $500,000 over 5 years, and others range at about $100,000. I will note that our grant making budget hasn't changed, so the trade-off is versus more organizations at smaller grant sizes, we are funding fewer organizations for longer term and larger grant sizes. In terms of ways to be in contact with the fund, some of our grant making strategies are closed, like the 7-year one. Some of them will be community nominated, so they won't be by invitation necessarily, and we have one open call that we just launched on Monday for organizations doing work to activate and sustain belonging that are rooted in Oakland and San Francisco. We anticipate that this is our only open call for the next 5 years. I'm going to pause there.
Good morning, I'm Dr. Kelly Bowers, and I am the CEO President for Three Valleys Community Foundation. And I think we're kind of the baby foundation here, but we're growing. Our mission is very clear, and our vision is to create a community where everyone has the opportunity to live a full and rewarding life. And we don't define that. We allow or encourage everyone to define what that looks like for themselves, and we want to be part of shaping it. Our general tagline, in case you ever get asked, is give, grant, and grow. We want people to give generously of their time, their talent, their treasure. We want to grant, and then we want to grow our community, not just the funds for nonprofits, but the sense of community and belonging, so that everyone in our region can take part. Some of the focus areas that we have, it's interesting with the Community Foundation, is that we don't have one purpose. We have whatever purpose or cause surfaces in the community. So we're very responsive to community needs. We attend to statistics and data and assessment reports from our hospitals and our health systems and our counties, so that we can really be responsive and help wherever the need is. So that could change over time. So for instance, if we had been really active during COVID, which we were just forming then that would have been what we would focus on, or as you said, the wildfires. In the case of the floods in Seminole, we quickly stood up a fund and gave funds to the school in that case. But our primary focus for the last 2 years in our Tri-Valley region has been mental health and wellness, health equity and access, and environmental health and sustainability. In fact, we have one of our donors here who really cared about the Give, Grant, and Grow Green. So that was our primary focus for the last 2 years, and then we also ended up working closely with a funder from the county and focusing on the opioid epidemic. And that's something that is a huge problem. It's something that we know we're not going to solve alone or in silos or in 1 year, so it's ongoing. And we're very fortunate to have just found out that another round 2 grant will be coming with that. So when you think about us, we're place-based. So our geographic region is primarily Tri-Valley. 3 valleys is the 3 valleys, Amador, Livermore, and San Ramon. But we find that, again, we don't stop at the county, cross line, the border. What we end up doing is we just stood up a fund in Manteca for Keystone housing for people who are unsheltered. We also have given funds as far as San Jose, and we have an extreme partnership with the Alameda County corridor. So we have to go where people direct the funds. And then we also have donor advised funds. And the donors who invest with us, they choose. They might get to an alma mater in another state or something. So we were formed in 2020. That was when it was launched. And we have our co-founder here, Susan Houghton, who could probably speak about some of the beginning better than I can. And some of the things that I think when people think of 3 valleys, we actually look at the 586-80 corridor and our big 925 Gives project that's coming up, our initiative, that will cover all the 925, which is 1 million households. So our scope for grants, our mental health and community impact grants, those range from $5,000 to $22,000, with an average of about $20,000 the last 2 years. But then our opioid settlement grants, those range from $50,000 to $300,000, and the average was $250,000. So, and looking forward to the next round of those as well. And the way that nonprofits can engage, well, certainly through this process, but we also have a nonprofit directory that's free to join. We encourage you to be on our events calendar with any event. Invite us to see you in action, to help. We'll volunteer. We have an incredible board. One of our board secretaries here today, Denise. And everybody on our leadership team, we have professional advisors, we have our advisory council and our board. They are part of our community, and they want to be part of what you are doing. So many of them are actually on probably your boards. So the best way to get in touch with us is to actually apply when we have grant rounds, because even if you're not funded, because we can't fund everyone, even though we'd like to, we keep you under our umbrella. And then often those are the ones that we tap our donors and say, could you begin to give to this group? They didn't get our grant, but they do deserve, and they're very worthy of funding. And the second opioid grant, that's what happened. We went to the county and said we had 41 applications. We were only able to fund 12 with the $3 million. There's others deserving ones, and so round 2 is going to fund another 10 of that same one. We don't have to do another competitive round. We can just fund the next 10. So that's the way we like to look at it. And also we take field trips. I have a school background, so we will come to you and see and help, and that's the joy that we have, is we are not a frontline service provider, so we want to help you do your job.
Hi everyone, let me pull this a little closer. My name is Anu Cairo, and I am the Vice President of Programs at the SH Cal Foundation. The SH Cal Foundation is located in San Francisco, but we do place-based grant making to support communities that are focused on improving the lives of families, children living in poverty, and addressing the structural inequities that lead to poverty, including racism and other contributors that perpetuate cycles of poverty. We do our grant making in Central and Northern California, so the top edge of the San Joaquin Valley all the way up to the Oregon border. And the reason for that is because the family who established the foundation, who's no longer living, owned a lot of real estate in the northern part of the state. And the way in which we do our place-based grant making is we partner with a community, and then we stick with that community over an extended period of time. So some of the shortest times that we've partnered with the community is 10 to 12 years. We've been in some communities upwards of 20 to 22 years, because we believe that that real and meaningful change and movement building in communities, those efforts take time, and so we're a steady partner to those communities. And then we respond to expressed needs in those communities. So we did a strategic planning process right in the middle of the pandemic. It was already planned. We decided to forge ahead. And what the process really was reaching out to all of our grantee partners who we know quite well and listening and saying, how are your needs changing? What should we be focused on? And we identified 4 cross-cutting themes. And again, we're responding to expressed needs, so we don't limit our grant making to these themes. But we identified elevating resident voice and agency. So really, residents should be leading change in their communities, advancing racial equity, community health, and there are 2 elements of community health: environmental health and justice, and mental health. And then economic advancement. And again, we were already supporting some of these efforts across our program areas, which are very general, youth, families, and education, but we wanted communities to know and to be very transparent that they could ask for support in these areas. And we wanted to reflect back to communities the needs that they were saying were most pressing. So a couple of other things about the foundation. We've been around since 1956, so quite a while. We have a volunteer board. Our annual budget is about $5.5 million a year is how much we're giving in grants. Our average grant is about $85,000, but there's a pretty big span. And many of our grants are multi-year. So the largest grant last year that we awarded was, I think, $650,000 over 3 years. And we're trying as much as possible to give general operating support and multi-year funding. In terms of reaching out to us, there is contact information on our website. We encourage people to call. We don't accept uninvited letters of inquiry or proposals because we don't want organizations to spend valuable time applying if you're not positioned potentially to get the funding. And so we instead invite folks to reach out and share information about what you're doing, and if it seems like there's a potential fit, then we'll engage in a next conversation to talk about what that might look like.
Thanks, everybody. I learned so much, and I have spent a lot of time with many of the folks at this table, so hope you were taking some good notes. There's a lot going on at each organization. So we've gotten a chance to get to know each other a little bit. Now we're going to dive into some questions around how are we getting capacity building, how are we thinking about the sector. We'll go through a few different topics. We're going to kick off with talking about grant making priorities and emerging trends. Here's the question. We'll start off with Jessica and then follow with Anu and then Queeling. So in an environment, it's going to be like a really good question. I'm just saying, we're starting off like, here's a question. Okay. In an environment where equity work, climate justice, and systemic change are facing increased public and political scrutiny, how is your foundation adapting its approach, whether it's internally or externally, to continue advancing these priorities? Jessica, will you kick us off?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, our mission is focused on connecting families that are living in poverty with basic needs and services. We don't focus on climate justice directly, and I mentioned we were primarily a direct service funder, but I want to speak to the equity work piece of it because I think that equity is really rooted in the mission of Sunlight Giving, just by virtue of it being a mission that intends to serve families that have young children that are living in poverty in the Bay Area. And by virtue, I mean that unfortunately it predominantly is people of color. So I just think that it means remaining open and responsive and continue to stay dedicated to our mission. So we're not necessarily pivoting in any way. I think it's more for us is remaining committed to our mission, and equity is at the center of everything that we do. Another though, sort of way we are somewhat pivoting or just remaining open and responsive is making sure that we are not tied to the sort of rules in philanthropy, in terms of like keeping to a docket schedule. Like our board is very open to if a grant needs to get out the door now, like we're not gonna wait for the next board meeting to make sure those funds go out. So I think what we're seeing now is that there is a need often to be responsive, and so just making sure, holding each other accountable and making sure that we can get grant dollars out as soon as possible.
It's music to my ears. I love that. Remain open and responsive, but committed to your mission. Anu, jump over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like Jessica, we've really been doubling down on our values and making sure that we're very explicit about a consistent and sustained commitment to equity efforts. Obviously that's in our mission and in much of what we talk about on our website, to other efforts that have become more controversial, but we still think are really important, like looking at and addressing climate resiliency, climate change. So we're doubling down. One of the shifts that we've made is to really focus at the state and the local and hyper-local levels. So understanding that many of our grantees also receive federal support, and that there are some real challenges and impediments, and funding is being disrupted. To the extent that we can, really making sure that they're receiving as much support as possible from us to sustain the work that they've done. And then also, we've been in conversation about directing new funds to addressing some of the needs that are emerging from the tumult of this moment. So many more organizations are in need of things like legal services, things that might not have been a priority a year ago. So trying to stay true, continue to provide funding and support for work, and not let the noise and the fear that's been stoked distract us from fundamentally what's most important, which is serving our communities and meeting and responding to those needs.
Thanks, Anu. I see a trend here and I'm liking it. Do you see catching it? Feeling?
Mostly going to say ditto, so I'm just going to add a couple of things to what I heard Jessica and Anu say. I would contend that this moment is full of acute crises, but increased scrutiny is not the actual problem that gets in the way of justice work, equity work, systems change work. That's long term, right? And so I hear up here that there's long-term commitment to relationship and being a good partner and a steady partner. That's what we also aim to hold to. And I'm thinking about what I hear from others, particularly organizers, talking about block and build. And I think that is what the moment calls for in terms of continue to build towards a world that we have a vision for. That is the doubling down. And to be responsive but not reactive, to block. And as philanthropy, one of our advantages, one of our privileges is we have some power. And so how do we listen to what our grantees and communities need? How do we step in and provide our resources, our standing? How do we buffer folks and give them permission to do the work that they're here to do? And so that's how I think about how we're moving in this moment.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, the block and build, doubling down on the values. It's really great to hear these things. We're going to switch to a next question. What role can nonprofits play in supporting your foundation's goals, not just as grantees, but as strategic partners, especially in today's rapidly evolving philanthropic and political landscape? We're going to kick off with Adriana.
I want to acknowledge that historically there's been this power dynamic, right? That foundations hold more power than all of you in the community doing the real work. And so for me, this question really gets to that. We need to challenge that idea that we are not partners in this work. We actually don't talk about the organizations we fund as grantees, but as community partners. And that is because in order for us to invite you into this process of ongoing strategy development, we need to be in constant communication with you. And so one of the things I think is necessary here is not to wait for those strategy planning sessions that will set the next 10 years for a foundation, which we're actually starting right now. But we just got a new CEO last year, so we're in a new moment. But I think the strategy happens every single day. Like, you are the experts. You are the ones closest to the issues. You know the solutions. My job in a foundation is really just to liberate capital so that you can do what you know what to do. And so what I invite my partners to do is to have an open line of communication. Grant making should not be a transaction. Like, I don't want to see an application, give you a grant, and then collect a report, because then we're doing a disservice to the community that we're trying to change long term. The idea here is that you and I are in this partnership. We know each other as people. If something comes up, if you have an idea, if there's something exciting happening, if you need a new funder to come in for a project, you get to call and say, hey, this is what's going on in my community. Hey, I'm getting together with people and this is what we're talking about. What are you all saying in the foundation, right? Like, having those open lines of communication is really important. At the Latino Community Foundation, we have the Latino Giving Circle Network, which was like our entry point into philanthropy. This idea that we don't just get to transform philanthropy as a sector, but we get to build it, and we get to inspire philanthropy within each of us. And so we see our Giving Circle members as trusted messengers, and as people who have the credibility and the knowledge of the communities that they were then investing in. So, joining a Giving Circle is a great way to also participate in our build out of the organization. They have been incredible thought partners as we go on. But also, just to remind ourselves that we're doing this work together, and to not be afraid to reach out and have those conversations when they're necessary.
Thank you, Adriana. I'm going to open it to Jessica and Anu in case you want to add anything.
Yeah, honestly, I really struggled with this question because my goals are your goals, essentially, and I guess the only thing I would add is that, just to your point about the power dynamics, I do believe that it's so important to keep a trusted, open line of communication, and I have found that as much as I have tried to establish that trust, it takes time, right? And it's trust-based is both ways. Like, I need to do my part as well for our partners to trust me and to feel confident sharing everything that they may be going through, even the stuff that's not very positive. And so I think the only thing I would add there is, just to keep those open lines of communication. And actually also, funders are really good, and I know there's a question about collaboration later on, about like wanting folks to collaborate. And I think in so many ways that pressure needs to be also placed on philanthropy. Like, how do funders work together more? And because that comes with challenges on both sides, right? And I can't tell you how many times there have been, while we are in these spaces where we meet each other, there are times where a grantee partner has connected me to another funder, and that has been very fruitful. Even if it's not, for a pooled fund, just knowing that they're also investing in this organization, it's good to know. So I think that's one way to help us with each other's goals, is to ensure that you're connecting us with, funders that are supporting you. It's nice to see friendly faces in the audience.
Anna, do you have anything to add?
I think they covered it pretty well. I mean, I think just honest feedback and communication about what your needs are. I mean, we are in a position of wanting to be as useful as possible. And we're not the experts, we're not on the ground. And so we need to hear from our community partners, from our grantees, from members of the communities that we're endeavoring to serve, what's most useful and what's not useful. And it is hard. You do need to build trust to do that. But that feedback is so valuable to us in then being able to be of service to you.
Thank you for acknowledging the power dynamics and that trust-based philanthropy is both ways. Kelly, this is the question for you, where you're going to kick us off. What new trends, strategies, priorities, or partnerships are emerging that you're really excited about?
Well, I tend to get excited about a lot of things that I have to narrow it down. But even just listening to everyone on the panel, many of the things that were being said and shared actually fill me with like hope and excitement. So thank you for that. I think definitely trust-based philanthropy, the concept that the people who are doing the work know the work, shouldn't just be a catchphrase. It really is the direction we need to stay and to support. Also, the idea of having, and I know we do this ourselves, I'm sure many do, but including people with lived experience in all of our decision making, in our evaluation of our grants, in the formation of our focus, because by listening and learning from them, we will be able to lead with honor and empowerment. And I believe that I'm seeing more and more of that, and it is pretty phenomenal to see many of our nonprofit organizations actually being led by people who have lived experience and they're representing the community that we're serving instead of having not just the power imbalance, but this distance. That's really what a community is about. The other thing that excites me is collaboration, and I like to break that word down as co-labor. And sometimes when you have a crisis, I feel like we're in crisis for many reasons because of the funding and the uncertainty and some of the attacks that are happening when we're just trying to do the right thing. But also, I think of there's a Chinese symbol for crisis, and in that is danger and opportunity. And so I'm actually excited about the opportunities that are arising because of a crisis. Doesn't mean I wanted a crisis in philanthropy or in our society, but I do think it's sort of the nudge that some people need to get out of themselves and to seek partnerships in different ways. So I'm very excited, whatever the impetus is, to see so much collaboration and so many people who are not staying silent and who are using their voices, whether it's youth or our communities that deserve to be served in ways that are meaningful and helpful for them. And then I know in our own grant process, I was excited about the focus on innovation. And it wasn't just a catchphrase, it really is groundbreaking, different kinds of ways of looking and serving and problem solving, and being able to invest and support in that is really exciting. And I came from education, and often we couldn't do anything unless it was tried and true and practiced and research-based and informed, and that's great because we're academics. But sometimes the things that we haven't tried, or the things we always wish we could do, or we hoped somebody would do, are actually the way to go, because if we keep that status quo, we're going to get some of the same results. So I'm really excited to see so many people, including our counties, supporting innovation. And I just love to be part of that in any way I can.
Thank you, Kelly. Anu and Jessica, do you want to add anything?
This is not an area that we're necessarily directly funding right now, but I feel like I've seen a lot of movement around support to student parents lately. It's in conversation a lot. I've heard of GI pilots in support of student parents. There's been legislation around, and I just love anything that has to do with the two-generational approach. And so I'm really excited just about the movement there with support to student parents. I can't help but add that we do have a next gen focus that's coming, and that is really exciting because who are going to be the donors of the future? They might be different than the donors that we have now, or the traditional donors, and so that's an exciting project. And again, it's looking at giving in a different way, and we're looking at the data, and we're seeing that they want to be more involved. They have more global awareness possibly, and sometimes it isn't just check or a donation. It's actually that they want to be part of volunteering and part of the fabric of everything that's going on. So I'm really glad we brought that up because it triggered, in my mind, something that is the future.
I think they covered it.
That's why they
In a very positive way.
Right. It was intentional. We want to get out everybody.
So much to look forward to. We also have this next question. I feel like we covered this a little bit in the earlier conversation, but if there's anything else to add, Jessica and Anu, around how your org has pivoted your grant-making priorities to respond to current challenges, but I feel like you talked a little bit about that, but if there's anything you really want to add.
I think maybe the thing that I didn't mention, I talked about sort of the structure of funding. I think also increasing investments, and again, these were priorities that we already had, but increasing investments to leadership and technical support, organizational capacity building, things that organizations can do to really shore up their resources and make sure that the work is sustainable. And I know we're going to touch on that in some other questions, so I would just raise that as well.
It's our next question, actually. We're gonna move into we're talking about grant-making, or building nonprofit sustainability through capacity support. So I spent a lot of time thinking about how funders can really shift their work to sustain our sector long term. So I'm really excited about this question because we must always be thinking about what foundations can do to help strengthen the work on the ground. I'm going to start off with Jessica and Adriana. What does nonprofit sustainability look like to you beyond program delivery, and how's your foundation supporting that? Jessica, will you pick us up?
Sure. So for Sunlight Giving, a nonprofit sustainability is ultimately tied to an organization's ability to thrive and continue its mission even in through difficult or changing circumstances. And I think Sunlight Giving is supporting the sustainability of our partners through three key approaches, and all are rooted in trust-based and being grantee-driven. So the first, and I feel like my answer to the rest of the questions is going to be general operating support, flexible, because I hear that that's the feedback I get from our partners, is how impactful general operating support, flexible support. I mentioned early on that the majority of the organizations we partner with are direct service and predominantly funded by government contracts, so by nature very restricted, right? So not every organization, has the capacity to give these large-scale grants the way that maybe like what a contract looks like, but a smaller grant can still go a very long way if there's flexibility there. And that's just from feedback that I've heard from our grantee partners. So about 86% of our budget is general operating support. So where we're able, that's certainly always the goal, is to make the grant general operating. And also multi-year, 92% of our grant dollars last year were for multi-year, and we're continuously trying to move the needle more and more in that direction to just help our grantee partners have the information they need in advance to help with their own budget planning, which will reduce burden and stress. And I'm preaching to the choir here, you know why it's important. But also lastly, through capacity building. We have a capacity building fund that is available to our existing partners, and it's responsive and it's grantee driven. The budget is a bit smaller there, so we do, but it's still flexible. And again, it's grantee driven, so it could be anything from a small capital improvement project, it could be training, those capacity building for strategic planning, like it runs a gamut for what capacity building needs. So I think that one example of how we've seen capacity building grants recently actually sustain an organization's mission is through a merger, actually. Two organizations in our portfolio approached us for capacity building support to merge. They just discovered that merging was actually going to help them increase capacity and serve more clients, and enhance, not only serve more, but also enhance their services. So that's another way that capacity building has supported the sustainability of works.
I will +1 on capacity building, and I'll talk more about that. But I just want to bring us back to the model of my foundation, which is we started with nothing, right? We had a great idea, no money. So from the very beginning, we always thought, how can we invest in organizations beyond the dollar? Because we recognize our grants, we're not going to be the biggest, we're not going to be the sexiest, but we could give you more. What that has turned into is really leaning into this idea that philanthropy is a love for humanity and loving really hard on nonprofit leaders. That evolved into our Latino Nonprofit Accelerator program, which is one of our key programs at LCF. And this one is investing deeply into organizations that are really in a moment of scaling up or in a moment that they just want to focus on sustainability. We invest in the leadership. We invest in their fundraising capacity. We give them a fundraising coach. We help them rewrite all their materials, redo their website, take photography, learn and practice and pitch how to tell their story, how to really articulate the impact of their work and be proud of it. And we cheerlead them along the way. We also use those spaces to introduce them to other funders because, like I said, we're not going to be able to fund nonprofits multi-year. We'd love that, but we raise our money every year. But what can we do is we can introduce them to our network of funders. We can highlight their work. We can lift them up in any way possible. And in addition to that, people are the most valuable assets that any nonprofit has. So if we don't invest in the people leading and doing the work, we are also not investing in their sustainability. 2 years ago, we launched our Rest is Power sabbatical program. And we recognize this is not very common with nonprofits to have your leadership or the folks that have been at this work for decades take some time to recharge. And so we invest in the nonprofit to be able to have, for now it has been executive directors, take time away. We give the executive director also some discretionary funding to do what they need to do for a couple of months. And then we equip the nonprofit with a coach and consultants to help them in navigating this time away and return to the office. But it's also an idea of how we decentralize power a little bit within organizations. We practice delegation and we ensure that everybody at the nonprofit feels very supported. And just finally, I think this came up in the last question, but one of the things I'm really excited about is the great wealth transfer, right? That we talked about, some of the younger donors that are coming into the scene. The trend that I'm excited about is spend down. Many large foundations have been hoarding wealth, and they're finally realizing that they need to spend it down. So I think part of sustainability is more foundations who have been sitting on huge endowments, tapping into that money and moving into that capital, returning to their communities where it belongs. And I think that is also part of sustainability. We're not there, but we are ringing this bell that foundations do not need to have billions and billions sitting in a bank when community is doing the work every single day and needs those resources to make it happen.
Thank you, Adriana. Anu, do you want to add anything?
I think they covered it.
Okay. Okay. Well said. Okay, so clearly, if you have any thoughts around, we're switching a little bit gears, but still thinking about sustainability. Are you seeing more funders stepping up to cover full costs like wages, tech infrastructure, or leadership development?
So Viri said she was going to give me this question, and I was like, is it okay to say no? Because that's kind of my answer. I'm not certain. I could be wrong, and if you want to tell me that I'm wrong, that would be fascinating and wonderful to hear. Okay. And so one thing I'm taking away from this moment is we should just do unsexy grant making. Like, there's a theme there because it's necessary, right? And supporting workers, supporting nonprofits And looking at capacity as a structural change issue and not a symptomatic one, that will take unsexy long-term work. One piece of data about the scale of the issue here, if we're only looking at wages as an indicator of how nonprofit workers are doing, there's an organization named All Due Respect who did a research study. They focus on sustainable careers for organizers. So you're gonna have to translate their data outside of organizing work specifically. They did a research study on the working conditions and how to support labor standards for organizers in Northern California. And from their research, one of their findings was that the median wage, the average wage for organizers in Northern California is $60,000. The cost of living in the 3 counties where these folks work, Contra Costa, Alameda, San Francisco, is $110,000+ a year. So the gap there is $50,000. And they did the math and said, if 200 organizers had their wages increased to meet the cost of living, that would be $10 million. But it's important to know the shape and the scale of what we're talking about. So, no, I'm not sure that folks are doing a lot, and there is, I think, more work being done, and so there is support being offered, particularly, I think, to leaders. That's what I hear the most about. Like, I've heard it from foundations up here about sabbaticals. Certainly in this moment, there's some tech support and cybersecurity, legal support that is in terms of the moment. But full cost, I don't think I hear about that as much from funders. I hear about that from BDO, Nonprofit Finance Fund.
So thank you for letting me ask you that question. I think it's so important for us to talk about where we're at, even if the answer is no, or we're starting to hear more, but we're not anywhere where we should be. So I think that's important to acknowledge. And we'll talk a little bit more too about just wages and sustaining the sector in our next question, in our next segment. But just wanted to pivot to Adriana and Kelly and then Piling around a little more around capacity building. So how do you think philanthropy can better support the long-term capacity, especially for orgs that are led by and are serving marginalized communities? So Adriana?
Invest in the people, not just the missions. They're both really important, right? But the mission will not happen if the people are not invested in. And that goes from everything from the salary. I agree, we need to pay people more, to their ability to spend time learning, like all of you are doing right now, to their well-being and their rest. Burned out people are not showing up fully because they just can't, so we need to invest in that. So people will also move, right? Maybe you are at a nonprofit right now, and I bet you, maybe you were another one a couple years ago, and in the future you might be somewhere else, just like all of us. Maybe we'll transition within philanthropy, but we'll stay within the sector most likely. It's important that we think of the people first, and then second is the flexible spending. I mentioned we don't do, unfortunately, multi-year grant making. I hope to get there, that is my goal. But we are very flexible. When we give a grant to a nonprofit, we say, hey, here's a grant, do what you need to do with it. We're not gonna ask for a financial report at the end. We trust that you're gonna take this money and be a steward of those resources on behalf of the community. And so the trust, we go back to this trust-based philanthropy model that we do. And then the programs I already mentioned, right, around sabbaticals, around capacity building, more intentionally. We provide resources, but also we bring leaders together with each other. I think oftentimes, especially folks who are in like the executive director position, that job can be really lonely. And so oftentimes the community and the support that can happen when there's a safe space to talk about all the things that you're struggling with, but also offer spaces that are healing, which is something that we integrate in a lot of our programs, has been really successful. And I think that is one of the feedbacks we get often from partners is like, our approach means a lot because for the first time many of the partners that we support feel seen and supported and loved in spaces that often feel extractive or where they feel tokenized. So like really centering for us a very culturally sensitive and intentional approach to our work is how we are trying to do better.
Kelly?
Very well said. So I've just had a few thoughts that came to mind. One is the investment in the people in other ways, also in supporting their training. And I'm thinking of one grant we funded. It was a fairly small grant, and it was a local one, but it was an investment in the staff who works with survivors of domestic violence and sexual abuse, because they were experiencing vicarious trauma. And it was a way for us to support them, and it wasn't our idea, but we were able to support it. And then my understanding is other groups and nonprofits that have worked in that space are now doing similar training. And that was something they couldn't get their traditional donors to give. They want to give to the survivors, and they were kind of forgetting or dismissing the need of the workers who are doing the work and the effect it has on them. So I think that's something that we can raise more awareness about, and certainly by sharing that with our donors, we've seen responsiveness. The other thing is thinking about what we can do is take the burden off of nonprofits. We have fiscal sponsorship. These are groups that want to do good things in the community, and they don't have their 501c3, and they're probably not positioned to go through that. But they still want to do good things. So we can be their fiscal sponsor and take all that administrative burden off for them, even invest their funds for them and grow the corpus, and then they can do the work and deliver the service. So that's been exciting, and also we can do agency funds. And so those are unique things that the Community Foundation can do. As an agency fund, they can still keep their operating budget, but we can help grow their larger funding so that they can invest long-term in their plans. And again, we take off the administrative and the investment burden. But in our grant process, I also see we do a bias training with our grant evaluation group, and we remind them, when you mentioned, for marginalized groups, and that sometimes the most polished application could be a reflection of a professional grant writer and an organization that has really a lot of other means of support. So we're not against it, but we also want to not overjudge. And again, that comes a lot sometimes from my classroom teaching. Sometimes when the kid does it all themselves, it looks a little different when moms and dads say, oh, how did we do on our science project? So again, it's that same lens that you're looking through, and you're seeing that we shouldn't just judge, or the big name. There's a lot of very small grassroots organizations doing incredible work with a lot of volunteers and no paid staff even. And that's also something we want to support. And in some instances, a little bit goes a much longer way. And so those are the kinds of mindsets that we want people to have. And I think also for us, it's about light touch reporting. We do things with the county, so we have to have reporting, but trying to have different ways. Sometimes I think last time I did all the writing, and people just shared. And so that's a way we can take that burden off them. They can share their experiences, they can share their challenges, they can share the outcomes, they can give us data, but they don't have to actually turn in a written report. So anything we can do to take off those burdens, because we're not providing the direct service, the nonprofit leaders like you are.
Queeling, do you want to add anything?
I'll add a little yes and yes. Workers. That said, Gen Up, flexible funding, that said. How else philanthropy can better support long-term capacity? Activate the other 95% of the philanthropic budget, right? 5% is what we have to make in grants. What's the rest of the 95%? So we are doing beyond the grants, there are reimbursements for organizational resilience. And folks have turned in receipts to us for vendors, for strategic plan consultants, for art, for morale, and we pay that. But that comes out of our admin budget. And so if you want to suggest to a funder, there's another place to look for funds that can support us. That is one way. Operations. There's a lot of power in operations for liberation. And so nonprofit organizations able to build their operations and their strength for the long term to be resilient, it's worth investing in that from funders, and there are folks doing some of that. that work, starting schools for operations folks to come together and do that work, not just like what is HR, but what is HR in the face of white supremacy.
Thank you. We're going to switch gears and just giving the panelists a heads up. We had a lot to say and time is flying by. So I'm going to be making some adjustments to how many folks will answer each question. So just wanted to flag that for you. Our next category is around the evolving perception of overhead. So we talked a little bit about that already, and equitable compensation. This is an important category, and Kathy and I have spent some time, thinking on this and I know that she's really committed to this particular topic and work and continuing the conversation around it. So I want to make sure that we cover it, and it's so important in terms of how we sustain the sector. We're going to kick off with Anu. And then the next two questions I'm just going to merge together and just open it up to both Anu and Pei-Ling to answer. So just to kick us off, how's your foundation thinking about overhead in today's environment, Anu, and has the approach evolved?
Yeah, so we don't have and haven't had limits on overhead. So I know some foundations limit the percentage of overhead they're willing to support. We really see that as an integral part of the budget. And the one exception is sometimes we have grantees who have programs or projects located in universities, for example, who will say, like, we're not going to get this overhead, so can we reduce the percentage so that they get what they need? And we'll be flexible and work with them in that way. But for the most part, we respond to whatever the express needs are. And for the most part, we're giving general operating support. So in that context, you really want to see a fully loaded budget. And it helps me to see fully loaded budgets because I'm sharing the budgets with our board when I'm presenting the recommendations. And if the board is seeing real costs, if I'm able to communicate the real costs of the work, then over time there's a culture shift where there's a true understanding of everything that's built in. In terms of the second part of the question and philanthropy's perceptions, I'm definitely hearing a lot more conversations at convenings, at conferences about what the true costs of organizational work is. I'm not sure where practices are right now. I mean, generally there's lag time, right? There's building awareness. And then the practices hopefully follow, and foundations and philanthropy can be slow to pivot. So I think it's our job as we're thinking about these issues to support those shifts.
Haley, do you have anything to add?
About compensation more specifically, or?
Thinking more about philanthropy's perception on it, and then, what conversations are happening at your foundation around funding salaries and benefits? Are you having internal or board level conversations about the true cost of nonprofit work, including thriving wages?
Yeah, I think what I want to raise here is that it's just, one, like Anu said, what the action is, that I don't see a clear line of how folks are responding. I think in part because it's scary and it's a really large problem. And I've heard funders say, even if we increased our grant to increase wages, like it wouldn't mean very much. Like it's not enough money. So there's a scarcity mindset there, but there's also some pragmatism about that, like that is hard to make a dent. And if you don't know that you can fund an organization for more than 1 year at a time, that's a hard thing to ask an organization to change compensation or increase it, right? Most of what I'm gonna say here is that we are having that conversation, and it's a nuanced conversation because we as a funder could put a nonprofit in a really bad position by saying, hey, what are your wages and why aren't they better? And if a nonprofit increases those wages and then we go away next year, like, that's messed up. So our way of doing this right now is to say, this is what we care about. We care about nonprofit worker well-being. Do you, as a nonprofit who we might be a partner with, are you committed to it too? If the answer is yes, great. Let's learn and talk and see how we can leverage our resources to support you in that work. So in the Endeavor Fund, we're working with 7 organizations over 7 years. We're midway through. I did not expect this, but a majority of them have increased their lowest wages. They have a lot of other issues that they're facing because worker well-being is not wages alone. It's not compensation. It's about voice. It's about opportunities to grow, professional development, particularly for BIPOC identified staff. But it's also, and this is what I'm learning this year, about fine-tuning workload. That one's a mess. So just to say, yes, there is conversation happening, and jumping in with an editorial comment here, in your nonprofits, if you're like, there is a way forward that would be helpful for us, it's worth saying, because it's quite likely that you have funders who might care, but don't know what to do.
And you transitioned perfectly to the next question, which is, what guidance would you offer to nonprofits hesitant to ask for what they truly need to support their people? Jessica and then Kelly for your thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I would encourage nonprofits to look at their existing grant and, request an adjustment to that grant structure. I think we're hearing, given the current funding landscape, I think more funders may be open to offering flexibility or by shifting to multi-year, even if that means from like 12 months to 18 months, right? Again, not every foundation has the capacity to give like a Mackenzie Scott type grant, right? But there is always room to make some adjustment to an existing grant structure, maybe even multi-year. And secondly, I would consider translating that need for your people to a capacity building ask. So if it's burnout, for example, that may translate to training or IT infrastructure. In fact, just a few months ago, I was talking to a grantee partner that was struggling with retention and recruitment, and it was a few months ago. And the staff that were there were struggling and were burnt out, and they were also working on different databases. They had this huge contract that required a lot of data input into various systems, and so that capacity building grant was for consolidating, having a more integrated data system. So just really thinking about what the need is for your people and how you can translate that into a capacity building ask.
And then when I saw this question, actually surprisingly enough, I had a one or two word answer. It was, what guidance would you give nonprofits who are hesitant to ask? And it's like, don't hesitate. We need to know. We actually do need to know. And then also I would like to just emphasize that if you need ongoing support, then it's okay to structure your donations like that. Some of our smallest donations are recurring, but they're recurring. And you can count on them, and they're going to keep coming. They're from the invested and endowed funds, and they add up over time. And so you could ask for the big money, or you could set up structures, and I know at least one group in here does that pretty regularly. They call it Project 88 or something, and so people are giving $88 a month, but when many, many people give that, it will add up and it will help sustain. So sometimes it's about rethinking how you do get your funds. And the donor advised fund experience has been really educational for me because I'm also working with our donors. And we have the catchphrase, give where you live, but lately I've been saying, why don't we give while we live? And then I sound a little strange when I say that, but what I mean is that wouldn't it be more beautiful to see your money in action, to see these things happen, and not just wait and give it as a legacy? I mean, you still could give it as a legacy, we'll take it, but and we'll give it out. But wouldn't it be lovely to figure out how much you actually need, and that extra funding begin to see where it goes now? And we have donors who are responding to that. So I'm learning in this role. I've only been in it since August of 2022, but who's counting? And as I go along, as I learn, I think I'm really attuning into the people who have
substantial means and almost don't know what to do with it. I met a donor who said, I can't give money away. And I was like, I can help you with that. I'll be the conduit. I'll channel things. You know, what do you care about? What's your passion? Let's make that match. And so when I look at these things, please don't hesitate to share what it is that you do and then help us get your word out and elevate your causes, because there are an incredible amount of wealth that is untapped. And our job is to get it. And it isn't always through the competitive grant process.
Thank you. So my two takeaways are, one, when you think about compensation and wages, it's very complex. We have a long ways to go, and it's going to require both funders and nonprofits, I think, learning and growing and figuring that out together. And my second takeaway is, funders don't know what you need unless you tell them, and they may or may not be able to be responsive, but it doesn't mean that they can't carry that with them and make change in the long term with the organization. So just want to leave you with that. We're going to switch to thinking about collaboration and funder initiatives, and in this section, for the folks who have initially been tagged to answer, I might have to just have you choose one. So really thinking about just our work in general, we cannot do it alone. It requires collaborations of all sorts. And so we're going to talk about what does that mean, and what does that look like, and what's effective. The first question is, what are some of the promising ways you're seeing organizations and or foundations work together? So either Kelly or Anu, if you want to jump in.
So, I mean, right now there are a lot of, I think, increasingly pooled funds and collaborative efforts to provide support. Collective impact efforts that are very different from the original collective impact efforts, in that they're community driven and driven by residents, nonprofits within a community. I think it was Jessica maybe who was saying earlier about the need for foundations to talk more to each other, and increasingly foundations are coming together to pool efforts. I mean, the needs, the holes created by the pulled back funding, and increasingly the needs that exist are so big that we're so much stronger if we collaborate and if we build the relationships to be able to continue collaborating. So I hope that this ends up being one of the sort of the good things to come out of a challenging time, which is that we learn how to collaborate more effectively, pool our resources, communicate about approach, and about the needs that we need to respond to. And that we continue doing that, hopefully as we move into smoother times.
And for us, I think I mentioned earlier about how we try to reward collaboration and encourage it. And so part of that is through our grant-making competitive process. If you are working with another agency, you actually have priority points for that. And also, if you also have an opportunity for more funding, increased funding. So that's kind of an incentive, but we don't want it to be performative collaboration. We actually want it to be genuine, and so we do attend to that when we're looking at the applications and seeing where that will go. But the most exciting part that we're seeing, kind of going to the next question, I guess, is when people are collaborating regionally, not just in the same space. And so that was exciting with our opioid Alameda County projects, where we saw one youth project that was Oakland-based, but they are partnering with the Tri-Valley youth on elevating the youth voice in response to the opioid crisis. And so that took people coming out of their box, I guess, and really looking at the bigger picture and saying the experiences could be different, but what do we have in common, and then how much more powerful it will be, and how much more sustainable it will be if we have this collaboration. So I think if we continue to encourage it and reward it, then it will happen. Most people really do want to work with others, they just usually don't have the time or the bandwidth, and so if we can make that space for them, I believe that is the answer.
Thank you. I know, Kelly, just real quick, thumbs up or down. Are you seeing a trend in grant making to coalitions or collaboration projects with multiple nonprofits?
Yes, and I think Tri-Valley Nonprofit Alliance is a perfect example.
I want to see where we're different, but you're in line. Okay. We're going to shift gears if that's okay. All right, so one of the themes that folks have been talking about have been the relationships between foundations and partners and how critical that is. So we're going to talk a little bit more about how do we build that relationship? How do we strengthen those relationships in order to do our work better together? I'm going to jump over to Jessica to talk about how important is collaboration between nonprofits when you review. Okay, this doesn't seem a little bit. Hold on, let me think about this. Okay, so part of it, we called it building stronger funder relationships, and under that it's also just like how do we also work underneath that frame so that we can build our relationships with funders and also work together on our goals. So it seems kind of, it's related, I promise. Okay, so how important is collaboration between nonprofits when you review applications? Do you look for partnerships, matching funds, or other sources of support?
Sure. Okay. So we don't have grant applications, but definitely collaboration between nonprofits is very important to us, and we think about it differently for the new partnerships that we are reviewing for potential alignment. Under core giving, we do look at collaboration a bit more so because wanting to get a sense of how a nonprofit that we are being introduced to works in a particular, in that ecosystem. So Sunlight Giving has been funding in the same 10 counties since its inception 10 years ago. So we have a good pulse on, how nonprofits are working together and who's filling what gaps. So more so when we're assessing new orgs is when I think we look at collaboration and how they're working with others. But when it comes to capacity building grants, it's less so. It's more about the type of grant that it is, what the scale of the project, because those capacity building grant dollars tend to be smaller. We don't want a particular project to be completely reliant on just the Sunlight Giving grant. So in that sense, we would look at what other funding sources or partners are a part of this project to ensure its sustainability. I think a great example, recent example, I want to highlight the work of an organization called Dientes en Puente on the coast that received a capacity building grant to work together, and they approached us that they wanted to work together, and their collaboration would allow them to serve more people on the coast. So I think that was a great example.
Thank you. We're going to be wrapping up soon, so I just want to encourage folks, we're going to be doing a Q&A segment to scan your QR code and submit your questions as we start to wrap up. We're going to be just now thinking about looking ahead, and let's talk about some hope, let's talk about I'm going to skip the question on risk. And we're going to talk about responsibility. So in thinking about those things, I'm going to be doing some cut and paste here, panel. I'm going to start with Adriana, and I feel like we need to talk about, where do you see opportunities for transformation within the philanthropic sector? And then we'll talk about our hopes and advice. Okay?
Okay. Oh my goodness. I see transformation within philanthropy by who is in it. Just like I was talking about the people on the nonprofit side, the people on this side inspire me. And I think about many of us who are coming into philanthropy as first gen, as diverse folks with lived experiences, directly impacted sometimes by the issues that we are working on. I'm an immigrant, I'm formerly undocumented, I am in a mixed status family, my parents are farm workers, they're now retired, they struggle with housing security. There's just all of these issues that make up a person like me in philanthropy. So when I come into my work, I'm not just applying the lens of our mission. I'm really connected to this work, and I know it's as important for me as it is for all of you. I think that is a transformation that is happening in philanthropy, that the people in it really care. We really do. And to me, it's not just a job, it's also very aligned with my personal purpose in life. And just like me, I know many of my colleagues are as well. And although we might not be the ultimate decision makers, we also get to sit in some boards. Our boards are becoming a little bit more diverse too. But I think really the focus of why I mentioned this as a person with lived experiences in philanthropy is because I get to be an advocate from within. And I get to push a little bit. And so, you know, I'm an organizer at heart. And within philanthropy, I see my role as an organizer of resources, not just as a person that writes a recommendation and moves out money. But I am thinking of the long-term change we're all making at the community level, and I also see the long-term change happening within philanthropy. And you may not see that every day, but trust us. Some of us are true advocates, not just within our institutions, but also within the sector.
Thank you for that. I think that's a great way to just think about how the philanthropic sector is changing, because as the folks that are changing and the lived experience that is carried in these roles, the work changes too, and how the work is done changes. So thank you for leaving us with that. Okay, so as we wrap up, I'm gonna have everybody answer this question, and so it'll be a combo question about what gives you hope in this moment, and then also what advice would you offer to nonprofits as they navigate increasingly uncertain terrain in this moment? And Adriana, since you went first, I'm gonna just go down the row and then have you, and then I'll wrap up. So Jessica, can you kick us off? So what gives you hope?
Oh, great.
And then if you can, do a combo, or just one, but, or what advice do you have for nonprofits in this moment?
Okay, this is the hardest question, I think. What gives me hope? I think a lot of what was shared already on this panel, the fact that there are, I think the executive directors that I talk to on a almost daily basis are the ones that give me hope, because so many of them have been through really difficult times before, and so they're actually the ones that give me the inspiration to continue, like that there's been dark times before, and that life keeps going. So that definitely gives me hope when I talk to folks that have been through challenging times before and have seen it and lived it. And advice that I would give, I think I need the advice, but the advice I would give is to stay rooted in your mission. I feel like that's what I'm already seeing, to stay focused on the good work that you're doing, because it's happening. There's actually a lot of positive work happening in our regions. And I think it's important sometimes to stay focused there and be a person that sees the glass half full. That's kind of how I approach life as well. So,
I'll start with advice. Tell the truth, please, and gather. Find your people. It's important. And it is what gives me hope. Hearing people's stories and the love at the center of it.
Okay, that gives me hope. I guess for me, what generally gives me hope, though, is what I would call the stick-with-itness, the grit that I see and the grace that I see of the people who are doing the work. And not giving in and not giving up, even though there is a lot of uncertainty and fear and things are in jeopardy. But when I heard the words double down, people not shying away, buffering the noise, all of those things give me hope, because I feel that resilience and that resolve. And it's really wonderful to be part of that, instead of being the only one who's trying to do that. And so my only advice is to keep sticking with it and to be steady, stay mission-driven and purpose-driven. There's a tendency sometimes for people to bury their head in the sand, act like it's not happening, or the sky's falling and they're getting discouraged. and disappointing and distracted. And so I guess if we can be mindful of the very real challenges, but not let that deter us. My dad, who passed away, always told me whenever I would get discouraged by all the crisis, and when I was a superintendent and all the things that happened, he always just said, be like a racehorse with the blinders, run your race. And that's what I think we're doing. We're in a race for the lives of many people, but we just need to stay focused, and we will get through, and we will come out and triumph for our community.
Just a few weeks ago, I was with our grantee partners for 3 days. We did our grantee leadership retreat. Certainly the leaders and teams that were in that room give me a lot of hope, because there is an incredible amount of adaptability and perseverance together on display all the time, and people are taking care of each other. And so, those things together give me a lot of hope that we can move through this moment with grace and effectiveness, and emerge without the people that are on the front lines and most vulnerable sacrificing their bodies and themselves in ways that are unacceptable. So one of the things that somebody said is, leave no person behind. Like, every single person matters. And so as we think about our tactics, as we think about collectively what we need to do, we need to consider everybody and bring everybody along. And that gave me a lot of hope. In terms of advice that I would give, Pui-Ling said this earlier, but find your people. The idea that we need to, that we're stronger together than we are apart. And right now that strength is really critical to being able to sustain the important efforts underway, and to be able to continue to do the work that needs to happen. So find your people, and if you don't have people, reach out. If you see others that haven't found their people, bring them into the fold. It's time to organize. This is like movement building 101, but we all, I think, need to embody this in a real and practical and determined way right now.
Adriana.
Yeah, the last couple of years I've been leading this work called Poderarte initiative, which is using art and culture to build civic power. And when I think about why this matters to me, it's connected to the advice I have for you. And that is to not lose sight of joy and celebration, even when you feel despair, even when things look really dark. When I think about the way communities, particularly communities of color, have gotten through really dark moments in our history, has been because they still come together and they see the goodness in each other, they celebrate that, they sing, they dance, they feel joy. So think of joy as a source of power and resilience in this moment. And also, be proud. Be proud and celebrate the work that you do. Tell your stories, don't stay silent. This is a time for us to not forget why we do the work that we do, and for others to not pretend that it's not happening. So storytelling and living out your joy are my pieces of advice.
Thank you for closing us out with that. So folks, we have wrapped up our panel. If you can join me in giving everyone on stage a round of applause. So thank you all so much. It's been an honor to be in discussion with you. I'm going to transition over to Kathy, who will guide us in Q&A.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you again. Thank you for moderating that panel. We are at the Q&A portion of the meeting for the next 15 minutes. I'm going to say the top questions. I'm getting feedback. Okay. The Haas Fund. Do you support Alameda County? Is there a fund that supports Alameda County?
We do support Alameda County with a focus in Oakland.
Okay. What about Contra Costa County?
I know,
Okay.
but also there's some work rolling out, and I feel like I can't talk quite about that. But no, not really. Basically, you should know our priority is Oakland and San Francisco, and then those counties.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. Sorry, that's making me nuts. Okay, that was loud. And then Jessica, I believe the county that you left out was actually Alameda County.
Yeah, I'm Contra Costa, the county I live in, so.
So
Sorry
someone
about that.
really does run in Alameda and Contra Costa County, which is
Just
good for us to know. Thank you.
Sorry, Alameda.
And then, so this is for Kelly. How often do you guide a donor toward a nonprofit to support versus them deciding on their own?
Increasingly often. So in the beginning, I really just said, oh, it's donor advice, so give us advice and direct it. And now I'm finding that I have better relationships, and so it's probably daily.
Okay, thank you. And then this is to any of you. Do you believe that guaranteed basic income is a tool for creating a stable economy and breaking the cycles of poverty that funders are willing to invest in?
I mean, I can speak just a little bit. I mean, the research on sort of some of the guaranteed income early efforts has been positive in showing a shift in particularly young parents' ability to be able to improve pretty significantly their quality of life and what they're able to do for their children with a small amount of money. It's an expensive strategy. So I think what is being done right now is people are looking at guaranteed income alongside other strategies that would cost the same amount of money. And I don't know if it's a one-size-fits-all, if that's the ultimate solution. But there are certainly some really important lessons we're learning. And the reality is that we need to be looking at every element of our safety net and of our social fabric, right? Because there's so much that's needed that goes way beyond the numbers that we're talking about in guaranteed income, like childcare and healthcare and high-quality schools and resources for new parents. So I think it's an important starting point, but it's not the end-all be-all.
Anybody else?
I would just add, because I've heard definitely a lot about guaranteed income, and the sense that I'm getting from the field is that it's in a place of building the narrative change, because it's ultimately a systemic issue, right? That people need cash and they are the best fit to know what to do with those resources. So it's one of those things where I feel like the research is already there on how effective it is, and it's more of an advocacy change that needs to happen at a systemic level. And so that's kind of where we are right now. And I feel like the partners that are working on guaranteed income are doing that work of just changing the narrative and making a case. And hopefully we all see more of a long-term, change, a systemic change, not see our way out of this with pilots, right, forever.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, and then next we have, we're facing economic and anti-DEI attacks with perception of scarcity. How do we not get pitted against each other and collectively thrive?
Well, I have heard from some nonprofit leaders who are in the smaller organizations that some of them had never really tapped into some of the larger federal pots of money anyway, so they've always been in this space. And there is a concern now that the others who have been more reliant on federal funding may now, get competitive basically instead of collaborative. And so I'm hearing that. I don't have all of the answers, but I would, I guess, caution and encourage everyone to approach this crisis or the threatened funding in a way that doesn't pit people against each other. So if there are things like merging, which I heard earlier, or ways of just being very open and transparent about where people are, and then trying to increase the resources, we can take advantage of the hyper-local. That's what we're doing. We're saying, I'm not quite sure everything, we can't control a lot of that, but we can focus here. And we actually do have funders who are responding, and they're saying they used to give money for this and that, and now they're going local because they can see where their dollars are going. So I don't want it to be a zero sum and either or and pit against. I want people to see there's value added, and we can increase the awareness and encourage and support more funding locally, and there will be enough to go around if we can continue to tap into. I think it was 4.9 or 49 billion GDP here. So the money's there, it's just not all coming here. So we have to keep working at that.
Well, we as a foundation have always been very explicit about funding Latino-led, Latino-serving nonprofits, which has been challenging to navigate since last year with the Fearless Fund case, which specifically targeted a group that was funding Black woman-owned businesses and grants to them. But when it comes to scarcity, I think this has been an ongoing sentiment with many groups that I work with, right? Like, oh, we are the Latino group in the community, and if there's more, now we're competing for funding. And I really want us to push away from that and really think about the abundance of funding that is available. You know, one of my colleagues here talked about many foundations only spend 5% of their funds. And so one of the areas where I see that something good in this crisis that could come out is I'm starting to see foundations actually dip into their endowments in a more meaningful way, acknowledging that there is resources available, right? They just need to pull it out of the bank account. California Endowment just announced that. They're growing their giving every year and exceeding their the money they use from their endowment. So I think there's this opportunity that's opening up. We are seeing also a lot of our partners lose federal funds because of this anti-DEI sentiment and rollback of grants. And that has been really challenging to experience because, as I mentioned, we've built really strong partnerships with folks, and so they reach out to us and say, hey, I just got this grant pulled, I'm having to let go people. So what do I do now, right? And so as foundations, I think this is our invitation to say, well, how can we step up then? We're not gonna be able to fill any gaps of funding that come from the federal government, like that money is massive. Some foundations could step in a very big way, but at least in our side of things, we are trying to support those groups that come forward and tell us what they're struggling with right now, which tends to be losing funding that is very necessary.
I also think there's such power in this moment about, and hopefully I heard the question right, is what does this look like for nonprofits on the ground? And I think the theme came up about crisis and opportunity and what happens in a time of crisis. And usually there's an opportunity to come together. So what does it look like for organizations who do feel pitted against each other or who will be externally seen that way to come together, to come to the table, to say, look, we're in this, we're fighting these things collectively, and it may look differently for each other. So what does that look like, and what does it look to unify in that way? And then how do funders need to step up to support the work that we're going to need to do? So I just wanted to kind of like encourage the organizing that can happen on the ground and leveraging this opportunity, and then also then communicating to funders, this is what we need in this moment as a group, as a community, as a collective, and how can you support us?
Thank you. Thanks for jumping in. Okay, so how do you balance the need for long-term systemic change with the urgency of community needs in your grant-making strategies? Anybody want to jump on that?
I can say something about
Great.
it. I'm actually just going to be repeating something that some of our grantees said when we came together, which is right now there's really a need to hold the day-to-day, so responding to immediate needs, and also looking ahead on the horizon about 20 years. And the nonprofits that we've been working with that have been most effective in pivoting in this moment are doing both. And so it's not a departure. It's not completely revamping everything that they're doing, but it's recognizing that there's adaptability and a need to think about immediate needs and also hold future goals at the same time. I know it's not easy, and that's why collaboration across organizations and within communities is so important, because no one organization and certainly no one individual can do that alone.
I want to acknowledge that there's just also a lot of no good answers, right, and no silver bullets. So I want to acknowledge that. Our strategy is to not be the strategy maker, right? If we fund long-term and substantially, then the organizations can make the strategic moves that they need to make.
Okay.
And if I could just add one last thing. I want us to think about the both end. Yes, they're competing, but a lot of our strategy has always looked at this crisis as opportunity for long-term power building. So we developed this in the North Bay with our Just Recovery following the wildfires. We did it with COVID. We're doing it in LA with the wildfires. Is thinking that, yes, there's going to be urgent moments, and that's when we become the most flexible, the most abundant in our approach. And then it is in those moments that we get to reimagine, because clearly something wasn't working for a long time. This just highlighted it, right? So we get to reimagine and then long-term build power with the people that came in for the urgent response need. So I think it's a segmentation and a build-up, but they both get to coexist. And so that's my invitation to always think, okay, what's the opportunity here?
Thank you. Thank you. So how do you think the proposed increase in excise tax for private foundations with large endowments will impact nonprofits? Next door.
Wave. I mean, one, it has to actually happen first. So if that's something that you think is problematic, it's speak to your congressperson, right? And fight it. The question of whether foundations should pay more tax, though, is it's not a straightforward one, because foundations are a way to hoard money. So why shouldn't they go to government? Notwithstanding what this government is doing with that money, or would do with this money. So there's nuance to that. I think the argument that's being made, by and large, in philanthropy right now, is that if the excise tax grows on foundations, then that will mean less money going to communities. I don't know that that has to be true, but if people are saying that, then that is. If it happens, that might be the impact, right? If there is not also advocacy on foundations to continue to spend at least at the rate that they're spending in true dollars, or increase, or spend down, or something, right? That there are options. But the simplest argument is, if the excise tax grows on foundations, then less money will go to communities. That's what I'm hearing.
And we're monitoring it closely through the Council on Foundations and the League of California Community Foundations, but also we have a professional advisors network, and they're all financial experts, tax people, insurance people, bankers, and so I've asked them if they will do maybe a webinar to help us understand and exactly what the implications would be, and if it happens, what they are. So more to come, but I'm not the expert.
Thank you. All right, we just have a couple minutes left, so quick question, are any of the foundations using AI to improve grant impact, and if so, how?
We just had a conversation, just had a new AI policy. We are not using it to inform any of our strategy or strategy planning, but we recognize that many of our grantee partners are utilizing this tool, and so wanted to have just some sense of how we would engage. There are some grantee partners that don't want to engage with AI tools at all for security reasons, understandably. So just having those conversations, we are having them internally, but we're definitely not using an AI tool to inform any of our decision making or our strategies.
Yeah, same. We're not using AI for strategy, but we are in a very early stage of auditing how AI could be used in nonprofits and foundations, and hopefully come up with best practices to then share with our network of nonprofits. We know most folks are using AI one way or another, whether you realize it or not, but we don't have a policy or a close look at how we could best leverage it, because it is a very powerful tool, but it's also a very scary tool since we don't know a lot of things.
All right, thank you. And then I'm going to ask this question. The arts create voice and equity. Funding for arts is becoming scarcer and many performing arts organizations are folding. Do any of you have any thoughts on this?
Well, I'm actually on the board for the arts, including the River Valley Arts, and it's a strong passion of mine from my youth and through my family and exposure in the schools. And so we have started a fund, and it is designed to bring in funding to help preserve the arts. But we've just started it, and we have very little funding in it. But what I have experienced is some excitement around it. But what's interesting is the arts is very broad. And so we have people who love only the performing arts or the visual arts or only music and all that. So I'm trying to kind of approach it with a broader umbrella. And the other piece of that is that we actually have people who see art as expression culturally, so it can fold into other types of grants, or it could be part of mental health, because it's certainly exposing people to things that give them better well-being and stuff. So we're trying to give people a broader stroke to see it's not art just for art's sake, even though I think that's a saying. It's also art embedded and integrated into all of the community and cultural things that we do. So my sense is if we approach it that way, more donors will see the impact, but it's not a given in everyone's mindset.
Yeah, there's a really unfortunate pullback of public funds around art. We see that with the California Arts Council budget being cut, with the National Endowment of the Arts basically pulling all of their grants. But I agree with that. The way that I've positioned arts and culture within my foundation, we don't have an arts and culture program. We have a civic engagement program that uses art and culture as a tool. Performance arts could be a way to bring people together, to educate them on a range of issues. Education could be another connecting point to arts and culture. Healing, that's another big one that's surfacing right now. So I invite you to think about, how do I tell the story of why the art and culture matter, not as a nice to have or something that it's nice and fancy and only people that have the resources enjoy it, but something that is necessary for community to come, learn, engage, and then be mobilized for whatever issue you might be talking about.
And I'll just add, because it's really good to hear this from you both also, for us, our stance is art is essential to belonging, to a thriving community, to community well-being. And so there's a grant strategy that I can't talk that much publicly about at this point, but it is about increasing support to the arts ecosystem. That said, there's only so much that one foundation will do, right, or be able to do, especially given the landscape post-pandemic and how arts organizations have been decimated. That's clear. The Rain Foundation just put out a report about that, I think this week. But arts funders are talking. And so whether funders identify as arts funders, because not everyone does, but those who do are talking about what do we do, and arts organizations are organizing and saying what they need. That's at least what I've seen in maybe San Francisco, maybe Alameda, maybe Contra Costa together.
And two more things. In my strategy for Poderarte, which I mentioned earlier, I also cite art and culture for narrative change, which a lot of funders like to fund, right? What's the story? What's the way that we're leading our narratives? And then for economic justice, there's also another big component about the creative economy, which is an emerging body of work within the arts and culture space, where we know artists are part of our community and they need to be compensated, and they're part of everything we do. So there's also an economic argument to be made around art and culture. But I love everything that you said.
And just to also add to that, because I spend a lot of time on arts and culture, is from my perspective is also how do we as NCG get funders to think about, to Adriana's point and some of the other comments, is arts and culture is not a nice to have. It actually should be a strategy of any issue, whether it's climate, it's housing, it's health, it's education. We cannot get work done and fulfill our mission and goals unless there's an art component and an art and a culture component. And because arts and culture is it's just so broad. It's narrative change, it's storytelling, it's how to move people. So funders really need to be thinking about how this is a component of what you're funding. So part of our work is really getting funders to be thinking about it as a strategy of their work. So I just want to note that. And then two, I just want folks to know that the arts and culture funders that do exist in the Bay and in the area are concerned and are thinking about it, and so they just know that they're holding this, they're watching things closely in terms of cuts and what's happening at the hyperlocal level, and also state and federal, and so people are very concerned. And I manage the Arts Loan Fund at NCG, and so I speak with funders pretty regularly, and so just know that the conversation is coming up in all of the spaces where these funders exist, and so they too are trying to figure out how they show up in this moment, what is needed. And but also acknowledging that this is not just today and yesterday. This has been happening for some time now, where funders have been retracting in the arts and culture space, and so we've been seeing less and less funders committed to the arts and culture space, which is very concerning. So how do we get folks to be thinking about this as part of every strategy?
Thank you very much. And we did reach out to some arts funding foundations, and we weren't able to get anybody to attend, but we did try that because we do know how important it is to our community. So I wasn't able to get to all the questions. I wish I had a little more time. I do want to get feedback on how this worked, so feel free to let me know, because it went pretty smooth if you ask me, but you might have been struggling, and I don't know, so let me know. Also, to what was brought up earlier about the executive director role being a lonely job, we do have an executive director roundtable recognizing that. Our new cohort will start in the fall, and we bring together 12 to 14 executive directors for a 9-month cohort, and we meet monthly. It's facilitated, and amazing relationships have come out of that. And so keep your eye out for that. I love our ED cohort. It feeds my soul. And then we also have a development professionals roundtable too. Especially right now with fundraising and everything shifting right now, it's great to bring people who do the fundraising for their jobs together and to be able to brainstorm and collaborate and potentially come up with potential partners as well. So we're big on roundtables because we really believe in peer-to-peer learning, and so we hope that you will join us. I want to once again thank our wonderful panel here.